Hello, welcome to Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota. I'm Katia. Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota is a nonprofit organization based in the state of Minnesota in the United States. Every third Thursday of every month, we host a global movies discussion about a movie based in true events or a documentary chosen to expand our horizons and educate us about important topics. The event is free and open to anyone. If you want to learn more about CGS Minnesota work, please visit our website, www.globalsolutionsmn.org, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook pages. Our Facebook page is Global Solutions MN. Our Twitter is CGS_MN. As part of our program, we recommended the film, give me a second, I want to, yeah, here. As part of our program, we recommend, people are sending me messages. We recommended the documentary Until We Find Them. Ladies and gentlemen, to share this extraordinary story and sad story of disappearances in Mexico, we invited the talented, my former classmate, Hunter Johnson. Hunter is a documentary filmmaker and photographer whose projects seek to advance human rights through visual storytelling. Working with the Perennial Plate, a two-time James Byrd Award-winning and Emmy-nominated documentary team, Hunter created dozens of human-focused short films that have garnered tens of millions of views. This work includes a show on PBS, a series of films on the Atlantic, and screenings at the United Nations office in Geneva and the 2018 AFI DOCS Film Festival. Hunter has also produced videos for Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. Hunter has also, Until We Find Them, is currently screening in film festivals around the world. Hunter has a Master's of Human Rights from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs with a concentration in Arts Advocacy from the University of Minnesota. With you, I leave you with Hunter Johnson.
Well, thank you so much, Katya, for that really nice introduction and for inviting me generally to participate in this global movies discussion. I'm quite familiar with the work of Citizens for Global Solutions, and I'm really excited to be here and to talk about this film and this topic. I was kind of refamiliarizing myself with some of the priorities that your organization has, and I think it aligns quite well with the goals of the film, namely, with the priority of exposing genocide and political inaction and failure to protect vulnerable populations, as well as a kind of a consciousness of humanity as one community. And I think this film is all about seeing ourselves in the other, and about empathy, and about how we're all part of a collective humanity. So I really thank you for having me here. So as I understand it, most people, if not everyone, has had a chance to see the film because the link was sent out beforehand. So what I think I'll do is, that was a very lovely introduction. I think I might just give a little bit more background in terms of how I got to make this film, and then I'll dive into the kind of the background of disappearances in Mexico, and then how this film came to be, and then ultimately what the goals of the film are. So to start, my name's Hunter Johnson. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm currently in Los Angeles. I I arrived about 10 minutes ago. I'm not kidding, because my friend's getting married this weekend, and I flew in from Mexico, and I had a little bit of a panic attack in traffic, thinking I was going to be late to this presentation, because of course we got stuck in a traffic jam. But originally from Minneapolis, and that's very much where my roots are. I grew up doing film work and got interested at a young age, and ended up studying film at Temple University in Philadelphia. And I double majored in film, but also Spanish. And upon graduating, I went to Honduras to work for an international NGO in Honduras that provides alternative family, kind of like a children's home for vulnerable children, called Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos. And I worked for them for about 2 years, and I just connected with someone in the audience, Doug Mann, who I know through that organization. Um, and I did communications video work for them. And then when coming back to Minneapolis, as Katja said, I worked for a documentary team called the Perennial Plate that focuses in sustainable food production. It's kind of a web series about the people involved in sustainable food production. Food is always kind of a theme of this series, but more often than not, they're more like human interest stories about the people behind the food, and that gave me a lot of really unique opportunities to travel and tell stories. And I mention all that because all these experiences in Honduras, working for the Perennial Plate, I realized through those stories that through that work that, like, the stories that I was most passionate about telling had some kind of element of human rights to them. And I really wanted to learn more about it and have kind of an academic foundation to be a better storyteller in that realm. So that's what eventually brought me to Humphrey School to do a master's in human rights. And what's really cool about that program is it allowed me to still have my focus be documentary filmmaking. My actual focus was arts advocacy. So it was applying visual storytelling, whether that's video or photo, to human rights issues. And that's ultimately where this film came from, through my work with the human rights program at the University of Minnesota, and also how I met Katja in the hallways of the Humphrey School. So with that introduction, with that background, I'll now dive into a little bit about the issue of disappearances and how I became involved with it. In Mexico, by the government's own accounting, there's about 90,000 disappearances since 2006. And that time period is when the Mexican government officially declared its war on drugs and began sending kind of military troops in to address the increasing power of drug cartels and organized crime. And these efforts made the situation worse. And indeed, many state forces actually joined forces with the cartels in kind of a web of macro criminality that drove violence into many sectors of Mexican society. An enforced disappearance, which many of you are probably familiar with the human rights definition, it's one of the most universally condemned human rights violations, in that it violates the rights of the victim, the person being disappeared, but also the rights of the family, who are in a perpetual search for answers and for justice, and kind of in this purgatory of not knowing what happened to their loved one. And Mexico, what's interesting about the case of Mexico is, usually when we think about enforced disappearances, especially in Latin America, we think of kind of political motivations, maybe a dictatorship cracking down on citizens that are dissenting. In Mexico, it's a little different in that it spans multiple presidential administrations, because this is a problem it's more closely related to organized crime, and using a disappearance as a scare tactic, as a way to recruit more members into the cartel. And so it doesn't necessarily have to do with your political leanings, but the state's involvement is, they could be directly involved in the disappearance, in that they're aiding a cartel to carry out this crime, or they're failing to investigate. And that's most commonly what we see, is that there's almost nearly pure impunity when it comes to this this crime in Mexico. As I mentioned, when I joined the human rights program, when I did my master's of human rights at the University of Minnesota, I became involved with a research collaborative called the Observatory on Disappearances and Impunity in Mexico. And this is an effort between the University of Minnesota with some partners on the ground in Mexico, including an institute called Flaxo Mexico, the Legal Research Institute at UNAM, and then also Oxford University. And the aim of this collaborative is to use academic methods to analyze available sources of information to better understand and explain the phenomenon of disappearances in Mexico. And our team in Minnesota, since we're working remotely, obviously we're not on the ground in Mexico, we wanted to look at something that we could study from far away. And so a group of student researchers under Human Rights Program Director Barb Fry began looking at the role of the Mexican press in reporting on the issue. And we specifically wanted to know about the type of information that journalists provide to the public about this crisis. And so I joined this team as a researcher, a Spanish-speaking researcher, looking at vast amounts of news articles and coding them. So we were reading news articles that we could find online, reporting on specific instances of disappearances on a case-by-case basis. And what we did with this information is we looked at these articles and we coded it into a database, looking at, okay, do these articles provide a victim's full name? Does it provide their age? Does it provide their education, where they were last seen? What was there any perpetrators? Were there any witnesses? Was there an official investigation or search launched? Was there any accountability? Was anybody arrested? And we plugged all this information into a database to better kind of study the trends of what's happening. And one of our findings was that there's a huge lack of information. With almost 90,000 people disappeared, we were finding relatively few articles about these cases. And in the reporting we did find, oftentimes it wouldn't give a lot of details. Now, there's many reasons for why this might happen. It's a very dangerous topic to report on. Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries in the world to be a journalist. Another reason is kind of the nature of disappearances on their essence is, it's a little mysterious. Oftentimes, a lot of the evidence disappears with the victim because the person is missing, and there's a lot of questions and a lot of confusion about what actually happened. But while we recognize that there was a lot of underreporting going on, we also were able to see a lot of exceptional investigative reporters and news collectives in Mexico doing an incredible job reporting on these crimes on a case-by-case basis. And so now, coming back to my role, I was a coder on this team, reading these articles and contributing to the database. But I also, as a filmmaker, wanted to look for ways to tell this story and put human faces to the research we were doing. And what really interested me in our team was what's the philosophy? What makes these really exceptional reporters tick? Like, we want to uplift them as really good, reporters and show them doing their work. And so the protagonists of the film, this is where we get to the film, Darwin, Franco, and Dalia Sosa, were two of these reporters that I read their articles, a lot of their articles, because I was coding the state of Jalisco, where Guadalajara is. I was reading news articles from that state, and I was very familiar with their work. And thanks to our partners in Mexico, I was able to be introduced to them, and they agreed to be interviewed, which turned into a documentary. And so that's kind of where the film came from. We, with the Observatory at the University of Minnesota, we're looking for ways to apply kind of a visual storytelling to kind of the more macro work we're doing on the issue of disappearances. We wanted to also complement that with real human stories with faces. We don't want to lose the humanity in this issue, because it's easy when you're studying this issue from a bird's eye view, which is very important to kind of see the trends and see the government's role and acquiescence in this issue, that's a very important way of looking at it. But we also don't want to forget that these are all individual human beings. These are all people that have families that love them and are looking for them. And so the film was really born out of this this desire to complement our research with real grounded personal stories. So anyways, that's really where the film came from. Now I'll just kind of switch into kind of the process of making the film. Once I was introduced to Darwin and Dalia, I went down to Guadalajara on several occasions, and I realized quite quickly that they're a complete 100% team, both professionally and personally. I was familiar with both of them, both of their work, but I didn't know they were married until the day I met them. And so, as a filmmaker, I saw a real opportunity to tell a more personal story about, this couple that are completely committing themselves to reporting this issue, and support each other both professionally and personally and emotionally. So luckily they were really open with me, and I went to Guadalajara on several trips, and I followed them as they reported protests, as they reported meetings with political figures like the governor, with many of these families present, demanding justice, demanding that the government search for their loved ones. I filmed them at home when they were writing their reports, or editing their photos, and also supporting each other, because it's a really emotionally draining and, quite frankly, it can be a scary job. And I really wanted to show how they were there for each other in that regard. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap up this because I definitely want to get to questions. I have a lot more things I can talk about, but I think the main goals of the film is what I'd like to touch on really really fast, and those are really to inform an international audience about this crisis. With the observatory, one of the things we realized was there was this outside of Mexico, there's a pretty vague and quite frankly, like maybe confused understanding of the nature of this crime and the immensity of its scale. A lot of people have heard of some of these outlier cases that have made international news, like the case of the 43 students in Ayotzinapa. And that was a horrific incident that gained a lot of international news coverage because of its scale, and because of the kind of because of the government's cover up, essentially. But one thing we were seeing is that people don't really realize that this is an everyday occurrence, and like by the government's own accounting, like I said, there's nearly 90,000 disappearances, but by many estimates, that number is probably quite low because of all the underreporting that goes on, because of the fear around the crime. So it's likely much higher. And so we wanted to use this this film to kind of introduce the topic to an international community, to try to generate some international pressure, and try to um, work in solidarity with these family collectives, and kind of reach an international audience, and get them to know about the issue, and get them to care about it through the lens of these specific people. So that's one of the goals. And then the second goal was just to uplift those exceptional actors like Darwin, like Dalia, the journalists, and really highlight them as leaders of human rights defenders on the ground, doing the work, doing the peacekeeping work. And with that, it's to amplify their work, to create a larger audience. And it's also, we hope, to provide them an extra layer of protection, because now they have, they're already quite public with their work, but now they have, more people in the human rights community that are aware of what they're doing, and care about them. So, yeah, why don't I have a lot more I could say, but why don't I leave it at that for now, and maybe we can start engaging the audience a bit, and I can talk a little bit more based on the questions.
Wonderful. Hunter, your documentary is so powerful, and in so little time, you tell so much, and everything is so important. And of course, that I have been working with human rights for most of my year at this point. And one of the things that I noticed is I and some of us live in a bubble where most of us know about different issues, even if we can't know everything. And that's one of the reasons we have these programs at the CGS, so we can actually share in a short period of time with everybody different topics that are important for us to know, that otherwise we wouldn't just have access to. And one of the things that I noticed is how many people have no idea what's happening, even if it's just next door. And so the first time that I had any information about one issue of human rights violence or taking place in Mexico was from a movie that I love movies since I was very young. I just didn't know that I could do what we are doing now at that time. But it was a movie with Jennifer Lopez. It's Border Town. And it was about the disappearances and killings of journalists. And so that movie is from 2007, but tells the true story of journalists that have been, killed until up to that point. And after that, we would think at this point things should have changed and improved. And not only it's not true, but it seems that the problem has been worsening somehow. So do you think, and I wanted my point is here. So first of all, thank you for what you did. It's amazing. I watched with my husband and I was very emotional from the very beginning. So thank you for your storytelling and the power of what you do. The second, I wanted to ask you, do you think, because what Darwin and Dalia are doing is very dangerous for Mexico, standards, and it's not a comfortable thing. I always was thinking that's a dangerous thing. They are towing something because you were coming back to the US, so you were reasonably safe, but they are staying and they are telling the truth. And not, as we know, not everybody can handle the truth. So I wanted to know your opinion. Do you think the disappearances are also, everybody is, can be taken away and disappear? Or like Dalia says, they suicided him or they disappeared him. It was very interesting, the way of her to say. So do you think the journalists are in danger as well as the common citizens?
Yeah.
And how much, in your opinion?
Well, thanks for that question, and it's super important. And you're totally right. I mean, I'm well aware of kind of my positionality as a filmmaker, American filmmaker in Minnesota that is coming to Mexico to film this story, and then going back to the U.S. And so the last thing I want to do is create something that could in any way further endanger them. Yes, it's a very dangerous job to be a journalist in Mexico. I think I had some statistics up here, and I think I lost them now. But about the amount of Mexican journalists that have been murdered in recent years and disappeared themselves. And so, for those of you that had a chance to watch the film, I think you see that reflected in Darwin and Dalia's personal decisions, and that was so important, I thought, to include in the film, that like they're so invested in this issue that it's affected them personally, in that they would like to have kids, and but right now they're postponing, or they're not sure because of the nature of their work, because of the danger that comes with it. And also, I think because of what they've seen happen to these families, and it scares them, quite frankly. But with that said, like, for me as a filmmaker, like, it's just a constant conversation with the subjects, making sure this is a film that is helpful to them and that they want, and then also that doesn't endanger them and doesn't provide any kind of information that, you know, that would make it that would be bad for them. And you know, we talk about all the time, and the mothers that are included in the story are well aware. And at the end of the day, like, you know, they are taking a risk by publishing these articles, and they're incredibly public already with what they're doing. And so if anything, like, you know, they tell me that they're happy that there's more people that know what they're doing, and that care about it. And so one of the things that makes me really happy is when we show these films to international audiences, US audiences, I should say, and they come away after the film saying, like, how is Darwin, how is Dalia, how is Nancy, the mother whose story is featured prominently in the film, who is seeking justice for her son that was disappeared and murdered, Oscar. You know, the fact that, like, people are international audiences are calling them by their first name and are caring, I think is a really really important thing in terms of just like connecting empathetically, and having, you know, really more people keeping tabs on what's happening. The second part of your question, you know, I've had the like I said, this film originally, like, you know, we wanted to use it to create international awareness, right? There's a lot of really powerful filmmaking coming out of Mexico by, you know, Mexican filmmakers around this issue. And, you know, I didn't want to come in there and think that I could provide, like, teach anything to that audience that's so well versed in this issue. But, you know, using the academic platform that we have at the University of Minnesota, you know, we thought our positionality could be, hey, let's engage the human rights community we have in the US and the academic community we have in the US, and use that as a platform to talk about what's going on. But to my, you know, something that's been really wonderful to see is that because of kind of the journalist perspective on this issue, people in Mexico, it's been doing really well in human rights circles in Mexico, because people are really interested in kind of that perspective, like what, you know, the journalists that are reporting on it and seeing it through their lens, I think is like a somewhat fresh take on it. And so it's been really wonderful to have it in some festivals and some smaller screenings in Mexico City and in Guadalajara and in Querétaro. Where was I going with this? Yes, a lot of the films can be even more kind of pointed in what they're calling for, you know, like, hey, this public official failed to do what they said. Hey, this person is corrupt and we need to get them out. Like, there are films in Mexico where there's even more pointing of the finger. And I think those maybe tend to be what puts people in a little bit more danger. With that said, you know, Darwin and Dalia have really kind of embraced the more kind of empathetic storyline in the film, and it's, you know, it's about the issue, it's about connecting with everybody, but it's not as pointed as some films can be, which I think could be maybe where it gets a little bit more dangerous.
Great, thank you. Arthur Canegas, that's also a filmmaker, and he has been speaking for us in the past. He was one of the first. Arthur, you have a question, please. And you are on mute.
I actually have two questions, and I'll do the first one first, and that is, first of all, I just want to say it's a remarkable film, and I sent it out to a lot of my producers friends. We have a group of producers who are dealing with award-winning films and so on. And I just put in the chat that Leslie, member of the Producers Guild, wrote, beautiful filmmaking in every way. So my first question, well, first of all, I think you did an extraordinary job of the film. I think you actually helped the protagonist in their safety, because very often once they're in the spotlight in a film like this, they have to take much more pause about trying to execute or kill them because they're in the public eye and they'll be exposed. So it actually, I think, it made them more secure, and they are remarkably courageous to be doing that work. And what a find, and what a great way you handle the film. And so my first question is, you came out of this as a human rights worker. Did you go to school in film? Did you get training? Did you learn on the job? How did you become such a good filmmaker? Unmute. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Arthur. That was really kind, and I really appreciate you your kind words and that you circulated the film a bit. That's just wonderful. I mentioned kind of briefly at the beginning that my background was in film. Like I did it as a hobby as a kid in Minneapolis. Like it kind of started, I think, the way it starts with a lot of younger people kind of doing fun things with your friends when you learn how to use a camera. But it quickly became more of a kind of a vocation, in the sense that I learned about documentary filmmaking in a high school course, actually at Minneapolis South High. I took a Humphrey, a course called Humphrey, and the first film that really got my kind of gears moving was, we had to pick an issue in Minneapolis, and my high school buddies and I looked at kind of media representations of murders in Minneapolis, depending on what neighborhood they happened in, and we luckily got access to having a interview with the mayor and all that, and it was just like, as a high school student, it was just like, wow, this is really I loved it creatively, and it felt like it really meant something, and so that's what brought me to study it in college, and then studied film at Temple University, and then did it for an NGO, and then worked for this Perennial Plate documentary team in Minneapolis. So I've been doing it for a while, and always either kind of on my own or with a very small team. So more like run and gun, having all my gear in a backpack type of filmmaking, not like showing up with a big crew. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I like the flexibility and the intimacy that is lent to you when you are with a small team, or when you're by yourself. You can really connect with people and not overwhelm them, and you can be more flexible. So that's kind of where I learned, and I'm still learning a lot. But this, to date, this story with Darwin and Dalia, I was just reflecting on it earlier today about, when I was thinking about what I wanted to say, the day that I met them, not knowing anything about them, but just jumping right in and filming, and now to where we are today, like they're really close friends of mine, and we talk like several times a week, and we just had a big event at the Human Rights program. They celebrated their 20th anniversary at the University of Minnesota, and they were selected to be kind of our featured speakers as human rights defenders at the Scallon lecture. And unfortunately, literally at the very last minute, they were at the airport in Guadalajara. They were turned away because of basically a vaccine loophole. They're vaccinated. They had their negative COVID test, everything, but they were rejected at the airport. And so that was a bummer, but they tuned in remotely. So anyways, I've been doing it for a while, and this most recent project has been kind of the biggest challenge and the most rewarding thing to date, I think.
Well, now on my second question, and that is, of course, very dear to what CGS is all about, which is Citizens for Global Solutions, looking at how we tackle this problem by new ways of governing our planet. And in addition to producing the film "The World Is My Country," I also have a weekly podcast where we have solutionaries working on solving the problems of the world. And we have Mark Ottinger, who is working with the World Service Authority to establish a World Court of Human Rights. And they're actually getting some traction on this and beginning to develop it as a treaty, which will be coming up to the UN to begin to create this. There already are regional human rights courts in Europe. Europe is the most effective one now, but there is one in South America as well. I don't know how much seat they have, but developing this World Court. And first of all, I want to invite everybody to watch the replay of that remarkable talk that fits right into what CGS is all about. You might have spelled under wrong in the finger. I didn't look it up, but that's basically you'll see when you go to that page. But first, and then I guess the big question is what do you see as the role of world law in solving these problems and giving journalists some space and being able to actually enforce the Universal Declaration of Human Rights so these abuses don't go unfettered and don't go and that there's no way at the global level to control governments that are out of control in human rights. How do we create law above the governments that divide us?
Good question.
Well, that's a great question, and it's a really big one, and I welcome anyone else too that that has a an idea there. I'll just bring it back to the film, just in terms of like the goal of kind of creating international solidarity, and me just from my human rights education that from this master's program, recognizing the value in getting people all around the world to care. We've learned about this idea of the boomerang model, where if people are calling on their government, if Mexican citizens are calling on their government to investigate and stop this, and it's not happening, there's value in reaching out to the international community and creating external pressure, whether that be through like large NGOs or other governments to get Mexico to do the right thing. That's kind of the value that I see in this film is getting trying to create that outside pressure. And but yeah, that is the big question, the one you bring up, and I'm trying to kind of do what I see as my part, using the tools I know to try to tell these stories. But I'm hoping it grabs the attention of people that are in positions to create the change that's necessary. But I welcome anyone else if they have some ideas too. The one thing I'll mention really quickly is the kind of the three spheres that this film has been used in so far are like human rights and academic kind of events, like tonight. This would be obviously a human rights focused screening. But we've also used the film for some kind of some direct support and types of events, and to generate awareness or actually support people on the ground engaged in this issue. Two examples of that would be we used this film. So those of you who saw the film, you probably noticed that oftentimes these collectives are ran largely by mothers of the disappeared, and oftentimes when they go out on their searches, they're literally trying to find clandestine graves and uncover their loved ones. And there's a sense of solidarity, and through this story, through this project, I couldn't possibly hold these people in higher esteem just by the amount of things they've had to learn because the government hasn't supported them. They've learned to be their own advocates, their own lawyers, their own forensic scientists, their own everything. But one of the things they do every year is they have a national search where a lot of these collectives will come together in a specific state in Mexico and do a search for some of these clandestine graves. And it's called in Spanish, it's called the Brigada Nacional de Búsqueda, the National Search Brigade. And this year, this film was involved in a lineup of short films that people could donate to watch, and all that money would go to supplies for food and for travel for these collectives. So that's one of the ways that it can be used for like directly trying to support people on the ground engaged in this issue. And I was really thrilled to be invited to be in that lineup. And then lastly, I said kind of the human rights events, the direct support events, and then lastly the film festivals. We've had it in about 9 film festivals, and those could be human rights focused, Latin America focused, documentary focused. It was in the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival this past year, and that was largely online due to the pandemic. But we were thrilled to be involved in that festival, and especially in a lineup of films called Seeking Justice. And the other 2 films were related to George Floyd and from local filmmakers in Minneapolis. So that's another way of kind of engaging the international community through these thematic film festivals. So I did my best to try to answer your question. I know I probably didn't do it perfectly, but if anyone else wants to chime in, I welcome more comments.
And let's continue this offline, because maybe there's ways, if you're a human rights group there, you might want to bring Mark Ottinger and myself, maybe David Gallup of the World Service Authority to speak and talk about that very question. How do we create law that helps and follows it? So I'll put my email in the chat there, and let's just carry on offline. But thank you for your good work.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Do we have other questions from the, Dick has a question. Dick, do you want to ask your question? You are on mute.
You are muted, Dick. We're not hearing you. We can't hear you.
Sorry. First of all, I wanted to comment on the last exchange. I'm like all the rest of us. I'm a member of the human race. And I think a dilemma that a lot of us have, including myself, is that we don't think we can do anything. And then we proceed to prove the point by not doing anything. And you just never know where or with whom you might have an impact, but you have to say something first to find out. You just don't know. My question was a very simple one. We have the same kind of problem, I'm sure, in the United States. We're about 40%, we're much larger than Mexico. Mexico is about 40% of the United States in population and smaller land area. And I'm wondering, is there any companion data at all about the disappeared issue in the United States of America? I'm a grandfather. I know of people who are teenagers who disappeared. Now, they're runaways. Lots of times they're classified that way, but there can be other reasons as well. But is there data about that?
Thank you, Dick. I really appreciate your comment. And, this is something that has really interested me as of late. A couple months ago now, I guess, the film was invited to be screened at the North Dakota Human Rights Film Festival in Fargo. And I had the opportunity to go there and speak before the screening. And there were some Native women that were participating in the panel as well. And they brought up the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women in North Dakota and Minnesota. And we had a really, brief exchange, but it really got my gears turning. And just in terms of, my introduction to this topic was always through the lens of Mexico because of the kind of the research collaborative that was set up at the University of Minnesota. And we had the connections in Mexico and we're working in partnership with them. But, it's crazy that, it's also happening in our state or the next state over. And so I'm super interested in looking at kind of the parallels there. But I don't know enough about kind of like what companion data there is that already exists at this moment. But yes, it's very much an issue here too, certainly.
I'd love to follow up if I might. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I know that a lot of times, well, there's a number of individuals that are also looking at boarding school issues. And right now there's, I know different leaders who are down in Pipestone who are discovering the graves down in Pipestone, Minnesota, from boarding schools. So I would, both with the trafficking and disappeared for Indigenous communities in Minnesota, and I know Amnesty has there's a task force actually in Minnesota, but there's different groups that have been really pulling more data as well as kind of partnering. That's why I was actually just at with Lisa Bellinger, who is right now the executive director of the American Indian Movement. We were at Clyde Belcourt's funeral on Saturday, but she's one of the leaders around that issue. And I think it would be great to put her in contact also with your colleagues in Mexico, because she's a human rights activist and we've worked in and through those issues. So yeah, I'd be interested in following up on that if you have interest too. So thank you. And thank you very much for what you did and raising the issues around both relationships, because I think it's really how we create relationships and for human rights, both activism, education, and change is really powerful. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Christy. And yeah, I would love to make that connection. So maybe I can drop my email in the chat or something, and we can start a conversation. That would be wonderful. And also, your fire looks very nice and cozy.
Well, we don't have heat on right now. There's no furnace working, so it's desperation a little bit. But thanks. And I was also I went with Barb to Flaxo, so I and know a lot of those players, and so it's wonderful to see that the continued work and collaborations that are going on across the university.
That's wonderful. They're such wonderful people. As I said, I'm in Los Angeles right now for a wedding, but I'm actually living in Mexico City at the moment, and so I'm hoping to. I just moved down there, and I'm hoping to reconnect with all the Flaxo friends. So I'll send you regards.
And well, last question: did you ever contact or are you in touch with Juan Carlos, who was a Humphrey International Fulbright Fellow from Mexico?
No.
And he actually ran the Human Rights Commission when he was in Minnesota. He was like, why are we doing so much on human trafficking? And then he had to really focus efforts on human trafficking when he went back. But I think he'd be a good contact for you too.
Thank you.
I'll follow up.
I wrote him down.
I can put both of you in contact if you want.
Yeah, that would be great. Please do.
We do have a question from William. William, do you want to ask the question, or do you want me to?
No, I just thought I would see if I could find at least one answer for the question about how many missing people there are in the U.S. And that's so I just got that off the net. That's all. Is that okay?
Thank you, William. That's important to have.
Okay.
I'll ask one follow-up question since I did more talking. Have you thought about how to put this into human rights courses across the different universities in the United States or overseas, and work with folks to do that as kind of a package?
That's a wonderful question, and I have done some thinking, and we're at a point now where we kind of wanted to see how it would do with some of these kind of closed events and some of the festivals, but that's kind of coming to an end now, and we're entering a new chapter where we want to really just get the film out there. As you know, it's a half hour in duration, which is actually pretty awful for film festivals. It's a very awkward time frame. Like, film festivals tend to, like, you know, if it's a short film, have it be shorter, or it's a feature, and it's kind of in the middle. But it's found a home, like I said, in some festivals. But a half hour is actually ideal, I think, for academic circles, because it's like, you know, a lot of classes are an hour long. You can watch the film and you can still have a half hour discussion or panel or whatever afterwards. So I'm really happy with that it ended at that time, because I think it does work well for that. We've shown it in quite a few things around the University of Minnesota, but I am looking for ways, and I've jotted down some ideas of how to get it more widely kind of in the university system and whatnot. But I'm also kind of toying with the idea of just, you know, putting it out there, because at the end of the day, you know, it's supposed to be a tool that is you know, used to raise awareness and uplift Darwin and Dalia and these families. And one thing that I've really gotten to see through this process is these family collectives are incredibly active on social media, and they have a really strong presence in terms of, you know, calling for you know, events, or, you know, just kind of being in community. I mean, they're very much together physically, but also they use social media. And so, you know, I think that this film could, you know, it could be powerful in that way, you know, because so many people that are invested in this issue are already using social media to like call for action. So I think that hopefully that it would do well, like just kind of online, just generally. But I'm also open to any suggestions if people have kind of connections into like how it gets into the kind of the university system or the kind of the academic system. I'm certainly open to suggestions there because I have been talking to people, but I'm still figuring it out.
Jack has a question. Jack.
Good evening. Hunter, thank you very much for all the work that you're doing and all the courageous work that you've done all this time. It's just amazing. So you've uncovered, you're basically giving a path, not a path, but a story that yet needs to be solved. And there's so little that we really know. And I read that New York Times article from October, which was a good article, but you're left asking the question, who's behind all this? And because there are so many questions, I'm gonna try to just limit it to one. Do you think that when numbers become this staggering in crime and the money behind, you know, drug dealers is so much that the problem starts penetrating the entire society? As an aside, I want to bring to light what's going on in Minneapolis in a much smaller scale. If you try to call the police and tell them that there's a lurker outside who's, you know, or somebody that's being beaten up, they will either not answer the phone or they'll tell you that they're too busy. Let's bring that in a much bigger scale in Mexico, where whether the number is 100,000 or, you know, let's just pick that number. People who are seeing these numbers and who are into crime could see how well this works. I hate to put it this way, but disappearance is a very difficult thing to investigate because you don't have a body. And so if a criminal decides that somebody's getting in their way, they could just make that person disappear. And it's almost like schooling an entire society of criminal, picking up on this idea, and then it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So my question is it possible that this isn't just drug dealers, it's pervasive and it's penetrated the entire Mexican society?
Thanks, Jack, for your question and for making the parallel to Minnesota too. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had all the numbers in front of me, but you know, with the work we did with the Observatory, of all the cases that we read and coded, you know, I think, you know, the thousands of cases, I think we only found, I'm not exaggerating, I think we could count on one hand the amount of times that we saw some kind of justice being served and someone being held to account. And so with that kind of impunity, you know, there's no there's no incentive for anyone to stop. And so yeah, I think it's certainly yeah. I mean, one of the things that I realized when we made this film was that, like, you know, we don't quite as an international community don't quite understand the phenomenon. You know, we see these big cases that make the news, like the 43 students, but like if you talk to, you know, an average person in Mexico, like this is something they do worry about, you know, and like because it happens. It happens so often, and so it has seeped into basically so many sectors of society. I wish I had some of my partners from Floxo here, because they're really the ones looking at kind of like the impunity trends and what that means, and corruption, and kind of the role that these different organized crime, drug cartels play in different states around Mexico. So they could speak much better to that than I could. Like I consider myself just I'm learning as I go, and I'm really just trying to use the tools I have as a storyteller to uplift kind of really the people involved on the ground doing the work. So I wish I could answer your question a little bit better, but I'm I think as Americans, it's hard for us to really grasp like how pervasive it is. I just lost my train of thought, but if it comes back to me, I'll say it. But thank you for your question, Jack.
Hunter, we have another question from Arthur. Do you think if legalization of drugs in the United States and treating addiction as a medical rather than criminal could potentially eliminate those crimes?
Total personal opinion here. Like yeah. I think it would help. I certainly think it would help. I mean, part of the reason why this film was, made with an international community in mind was, as I said, to generate outside pressure, but also, everything's interconnected. And, Darwin says in the film, the drug trade is a huge transnational business structure, and we are consumers. And that's doing a lot to provide support to these organizations, but also to Darwin also says in the film, it's hard to say why people are disappeared, because they're disappeared for many reasons. But one of the reasons is to generate a workforce to do this work. And if that demand was gone or decreased, hopefully there wouldn't be quite as much of a need for that workforce. The other topic that that I think this film hopefully sheds light on is asylum seekers, and kind of the context that people might be fleeing coming to the U.S. and generating more empathy for those types of folks. This is much harder to know the statistics on because of the nature of immigration, but a lot of people immigrating from Central America are disappeared along the route through Mexico to the U.S. And so I'm hoping also that this film maybe provides a little bit of context to how dangerous that journey is, and what it really means for someone to flee whatever situation they're fleeing, if that's what they have to go through. It's like that it truly says a lot about the type of situations they're trying to leave.
Thank you. We have another question from Jim.
Yes, this is, I would call it a curiosity question, but for a longtime crusader on various things, I'm curious, you've created a monumental film, and it must have been a monumental task to develop it and to distribute it and to keep the ball rolling. My question is very general, but how do you sustain yourself financially as you're creating a movie which you let people look at for free? And again, with the larger hope that you've talked about your goals and so forth of creating a sense of support for the people who are doing this work in the field. But how do you sustain this monumental effort?
Well, thank you, James. I appreciate, I really appreciate it. This was all born from the research that the Human Rights Program has done under Director Barb Fry and in collaboration with these other institutes. And so that's really how I was able to sustain it. I first as a student and doing this research, kind of as like a student working job, or I had a lot of support from the program. Also, there are other kind of grants you can apply to within the University of Minnesota kind of system that helped push the project along. And so it entirely, the answer to your question is that the University of Minnesota and the Human Rights Program kept it going. And and I'm very, very grateful for that support. And also, I think it was mutually beneficial in the sense that like this film, like I said at the beginning of the conversation, is designed to complement the research that the university was doing with the observatory. I mean, it's really a part of it. It's a creative component, and so I think it was beneficial to the university too to have this to go with the research. And so, but yeah, it was all kind of pushed along by the University of Minnesota and the Human Rights Program.
Again, just to echo other people, wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have a question from Gail. There is a rash of young women who were disappeared, in quote unquote, from Juarez several years ago. Is that continuing? Are the reasons probably the same? I suspect it was to do with sex trade rather than drug trade. So that's from Gail.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. And I'm familiar with this specific case of I think I can't remember how many years ago it was when it was really in the news in Juarez with women. And from my knowledge, like that, a lot of that was I mean, it could have had connections with organized crime, but a lot of that was domestic, and I think that relates to this issue of impunity too, with crimes not being investigated or not taken seriously. I don't know what the current state is, but again, to tie it back to the film, Darwin mentions how difficult it is to define disappearance, because oftentimes there's not just one reason. And from my understanding in Juarez, there was a lot of serious domestic abuse going on, and but I'm not sure of the current state. But again, the state's role, the government's role, sometimes they can be directly involved in the crime, working in tandem with these organizations, and other times they're simply not investigating. And so it's still on them to do their duty to investigate these crimes and hold people to account. And so it's still the government's issue.
We have another question from Matthew LaFontaine.
Hey, thanks, Hunter. I have a follow-on question to Jim. Just how financially sustainable would you say the work has been for the journalists? Maybe the ones you were coding for, if you know, but especially for Dalia and Darwin, are they able to make a living just off of the journalism they do?
That's a great question, and I don't think they would be able to do it solely off the journalism they do. They have an independent collective called Zona Docs, which I encourage everyone to follow and to look up on the social media channels and everything. Darwin is a university professor, and so I think maybe that's largely how they support themselves financially. I know that their independent collective Zona Docs does get some human rights grants to help support them too, but I think if they were to entirely do that, I think it would be difficult with just kind of the type of work that they do, and that they are truly independent. And so they work with a lot of students. I know Darwin, he teaches journalism at a university, a private university in Guadalajara. And I mean, I've witnessed him in the classroom and how he inspires these kids. And like a lot of them want to be journalists. And you know, I've had conversations with some of these students too, you know, talking about that they're scared. It's something they want to do, but they're scared, and it's fascinating to kind of hear their perspective. But Darwin also, you know, helps, and Dalia, they help kind of embrace and support those students that want to like get their hands dirty, and you know, maybe it's not always an issue like disappearances. You know, they cover other things, but you know, they help support students to learn how to do podcasts and how to do video and how to write. And so it's really cool to see that. But to answer your question, yeah, I think they need some outside support to keep it going.
Thank you, Matthew. So now, Hunter, that you're basically you already moved to Mexico. So what can you share with us a little of what your future plans are? Do you intend to continue working on this project of the disappearances, or you have other human rights issues that you intend to do in parallel or in addition or in replacement to that? Can you share a little with us?
Yeah, certainly. So this project, until we find them, is, you know, it's wrapping up, and the you know, it's still kind of in its distribution, and that's certainly something I'm still working on, is finding new avenues to get it out there. There was another film that was created in tandem with this that will also be shared soon. That is about a state commissioner. Her name is Sol Salgado, and she's the search commissioner in the state of Mexico, which is outside of Mexico City. And it's a newly appointed position that was founded by the demands of these family collectives to have kind of a more neutral body that isn't that's solely responsible for search. It's not responsible for investigations. It's all about finding and working in tandem with these families. So it's a really interesting position because she finds herself kind of in between. You know, she works for the government, but she represents the families, and so there's a lot of tension there. And it's a shorter film. I spent less time with her, but I think it's really interesting. So I'm figuring out how to kind of release that as well. But also, yeah, just trying to be a freelancer and focus my work still in human rights, and luckily getting some really interesting projects that that, you know, deal with some other issues. I'm currently working with a woman that's holds a mandate from the UN, which is the special rapporteur on defending human rights while countering terrorism. And Fanula Nieolin, she actually works at the University of Minnesota, and helping her with some video projects to support that show the work of her and her team with the United Nations. And so that's been a really fascinating project, and another one where I'm learning a lot. So I'm hoping to keep working in that kind of area.
She's the special rapporteur of the UN. That's amazing. We have another question from Nancy.
Well, yeah, I comment, see what you say to this, but in terms of getting it into colleges or classes and use, certainly for human rights, but I feel like for journalism as well, because those two are so courageous and are doing what we need journalists to do, which is speak the truth. You know, really, like they were saying, they're the echo of the voices or the hearts of these mothers who are trying to get something done. So I feel like it's so powerful, the message of what journalism should be.
Mm-hmm.
You have any comments about that?
No, I think that's a great point. And one of the virtual screenings we've done in Mexico actually was through a journalism course, and it was I was invited to kind of tune in, and so was Darwin, and that was such an interesting conversation, in that, like, I really got to sit back and watch Darwin answer all these questions about all these students that are studying journalism that want to know about how he approaches his work. And so I definitely saw the value there in putting it in journalism classes, and that was in Mexico, but I think it could be, you know, just as valuable in the US.
Around the world, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. Wow. I think everybody was so excited to see your documentary, and it was so great to hear you. And it's been a long time that you and I had not had the opportunity to talk, so I'm glad that we did. I think if we don't have any other questions in the audience, we're going to say goodbye. I would like to thank everybody on behalf of the CGS Minnesota for attending this event. If you do want to watch again, the recording can be found on our website and our YouTube channel. The CGS Minnesota hosts events every month. Please visit our website to learn what the next events are. Hunter, thank you so very much for coming here, for speaking with us, for doing the documentary and all the shorts and documentaries that you have been doing, and for dedicating your time and your professional life to this important topic that's human rights and different human rights. We appreciate your work very much. We are always here. You are always invited to come back anytime you want. You are one of our favorites, and we have some very good ones. So with that, I leave you, Hunter, with your final thoughts and final message to the group.
No, just to echo, I thank you for inviting me, and thanks everyone for watching the film and having this, being a part of this conversation, and having really, really thoughtful and difficult questions and comments. Difficult in the sense that it's just really big issue, and it's but I so appreciate being able to share the film in this space, and I hope to keep engaging with your wonderful community. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so very much, everybody. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed. Keep in touch with us for the next events. We always have an event every month.
What do you
See you again soon. Thank you so much.
Fun at your wedding.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.